So Joe Galati has come full circle, and it's a great honor for me to introduce him and to sit back and listen to his advice on entrepreneurship. Please welcome Joe Galati.
Well, thank you. It is an honor to be here, and everything Al said was true. And when I was thinking of a topic and what in the world am I going to talk about, it all goes back to this discussion under the streetlights, and it really did happen for a number of years. We would meet out there. So this morning, just to give you a quick overview, we have a fair amount of ground to cover. So I'm going to talk about how rejection, and when you listen to everybody's story of their own little world, it's rejection and being kicked out and fired and you're no good is all part of a lot of what we went through. My sense that communication skills and sincerity will open doors no matter what the situation is. How breakfast at the White House was one of those game changers for me. What I've learned from my patients, and that Willie Nelson is a cool guy. So we'll talk about that. Now, just to get to the punchline here, to talk about really what Al just spoke about. So Al, when we moved to Houston from Nebraska, Al and Donna were really the first two people we met. They were in our cul-de-sac. And we had this evening rendezvous at about 10 o'clock at night. Al was usually taking his dogs out. I was getting the mail, because my house is right across the street from the mailbox. And I don't know if you could dim the lights a little bit, but basically this is the mailbox. X marks the spot where we would literally stand there. And first it was 5 minutes, and then it was 10 minutes, and then it was 30 minutes, and then it would be an hour or two. My wife would be looking out the window. Donna would come out, I'm going to bed, see ya, the keys under the door. But really, as Al had said, he would say, so what's the deal at UT? What's going on there? What control do you have? Who handles the cash? Can you do this yourself? He really challenged me to say, Joe, get the hell out of there. And then the best thing was, Joe, I know people that can help you. And he hooked me up with, EO and the whole system here. And as Al said, I always knew there were problems with the situation, but I just wasn't quite sure how to get out of there. So when I look at my life or my story, I look at this as a weave, and I think that's the way all of you need to look at your life. So for me personally, all the events and experiences that I've had somehow are interconnected, and you'll see these are not random acts that happen. They're all interweaved into... So when we look at what has influenced me and how I got to where I'm at now, there's three influences. One is this projector. So I am in first grade, God's honest truth, 1965, I'm 6 years old. Now my father, I said, was in pharmaceutical sales. So at the time, the technology that the pharmaceutical representatives would take in the doctor's office was this Technicolor projector, and he had a library of about 100 Technicolor videos in a little loop, it was in a little cartridge, of different medical procedures and surgeries that dealt with the different drugs that he sold. And I would sit in our basement in the dark and just look at these videos non-stop, very sort of primitive surgical procedures, and I was addicted to this stuff. Now, here we are, first grade, kids come over to the house, let's go down to the basement, let's fire up these movies. And my parents are getting complaints from other kids. Johnny is having nightmares. He's seeing blood. Okay? And so my parents have to sit me down and basically say, look, Joseph, not all kids are like you. They don't like this kind of stuff. So you can watch it, show it with mom and dad, but don't show this to other kids. And so, again, I was, and most of the biggest drug that he was selling then was Gelusil, which is an antacid, and ulcers. And so today we have flexible endoscopes that sort of slide down. Back then in the 60s, they were rigid metal scopes that you look like a sword swallower that you would have to put down in the operating room. Very cool to see for me. And it's funny how I am a board-certified gastroenterologist now. So you know, is there a connection here? So that was influence one. The second one, I wanted to be on the radio. And so Christmas 1968, I get this Iowa quarter-inch reel-to-reel tape recorder. Now, how do I know it's 1968? Well, that was the year my grandmother died. And she died around Christmas time, and we were all in mourning, and nobody got Christmas presents. My parents got us one toy, and it was this tape recorder, because my sisters and I and my cousins, we'd go in the basement, listen to the radio, and back then, and similar to today, there were a lot of call-in radio stations in New York. Call in and get your song on. And so we would call Saturday night, we would call these radio stations in New York City, fake our voice, make these outrageous names up, and they would take our call. And we'd be on the radio, okay? And special long-distance dedication to so-and-so, and we're like, is this real? They are falling for this. And so we started goofing around, doing our own little radio thing. So my parents buy us a tape recorder so we could make our own radio, sort of, situations. And we'd play, and we'd just have a ball doing this. So this little tape recorder was a big deal. And then photography. I have been a lifelong photographer. And when I was 10 years old, in 1969, I was given this Rolleiflex 1953 Rolleiflex camera from my uncle. And I, had this, great camera that I was learning photography. And so between this whole medical thing, radio and photography, it was really very impressive. Now, the photographer was my mother's brother, Uncle Larry, the guy in the back by the arrow. He was a pretty well-known photographer in New York City. And again, this was a typical birthday party or Friday night dinner get-together. Uncle Larry would come over. The next morning, we'd have 20 or 30 8x10 black and white glossies on our table. We didn't have little Instamatic pictures. We had 8x10 glossies for everything. So, again, growing up, our pictures were these beautiful black and white photographs. So, if you fast forward, here I am. I'm indeed a physician in the world's largest medical center, heading up a big transplant program. I think I'm a pretty good photographer now, and I'm on the radio. But this was not an easy place to live. This was nearly fourth world. This was your shower routine, basically a bag of water, a bucket, a thing of Breck shampoo, but I am in medical school, I'm loving it, and you're not hearing a complaint out of me. We would take showers in a ditch, and this is what you had to do. This is what you had to do. And of course, it was absolutely beautiful. The people are absolutely marvelous there. This was, sort of between classes, talking with the local kids there, and really getting into the environment there. But how much worse could it get? The place is invaded. And so I went down there in early 1983. President Reagan, Grenada was on the radar. Grenada was on the radar because of the revolution they had in 1979. It was a Cuban-like colony. And it was all that he said it was. This was really quite a beautiful place that turned into a real joint. And so the propaganda on the radio, the anti-Americanism, it really was unbelievable. They loved the students. They really, even despite all the crazy politics, they really loved the students there. But on the morning of October 25th, 1983, we wake up to shelling and bombing and machine guns, and the place when, literally, I'm saying, from, what did Robert Duvall say? You love the smell of napalm in the morning? I know what it smells like. So anyway, so this is the helicopter that finally got me out. There's President Reagan on the radio. And so I'm sitting there saying, what the hell? What the hell? I try to go to medical school and the place is getting bombed and shelled. And so there was, for a week before I got off, before this all started, there was a 24-hour shoot-on-site curfew. I was on the last helicopter off the island. We lived off sort of in the hills, and you know, military intelligence, they didn't quite know where, you know, we were. And we had water for basically 7 days. It really was pretty cool. But I get a call from President Reagan. So as we are flying back to the States, we land at Roosevelt Roads Naval Air Station to refuel our C-141 that we were flying home on. And we are in like a state of freaking shock. We just got the clothes on our back. You go into the airport there at the base, Newsweek, Time, you see, you know, Grenada, this and that. I'm like, shit, we're just coming out of this. And so there was the Navy set up a bank of telephones. You could call anybody anywhere in the world. I call my parents and tell them I'm alive and everything's okay. And then I'm sitting there and I said, let me call Western Union and send President Reagan a telegram. And so I just sort of dictate off a telegram telling them that, you know, what had happened. We met a lot of the military personnel. They were all young men and women. They were wonderful, blah, 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 blah. I get home. 3 days later, I'm out to dinner with some friends. And, you know, again, this is before cell phones and whatnot. My mother calls the restaurant that we're at. It's about 10 o'clock at night. And she said, Joe, you will not believe it. President Reagan just called. I'm like, come on. President Reagan called. No, he got your telegram. I'm like, is this a joke? She's like, no. She says, you know, the White House called. President Reagan wanted to talk to you. I said, what did you tell him? I said, you're out with friends. She said, but there's this guy that you could call up until 11 o'clock. So I'm like, okay. So I leave, I go home, and I call this guy up, and indeed it is the White House. And they said, well, you know, President, you know, he went to bed, but he got your telegram. He'd like you to come to the White House in like 4 days for breakfast and a reception to meet you and about, you know, 40 other students and the military and this and that. So I'm like, I'm there. So these are two very poor photographs that I took that I sent back to him to sign. And interesting, see this guy here? That's a photographer. That's me. In one of Reagan's books, and so just anyway, so I really was there. But anyway, so you know, I had the opportunity after we met and we had breakfast. We went into the White House, and each one of us had about 5 minutes with he and Nancy to basically just sit and talk about what we were doing, what our future aspirations were, what was going on in Grenada, and this and that. And I'll tell you, it was just magical. It was just magical to be standing with him in the White House. And again, it was one of those, you know, boosting experiences. Say, okay, I'm 24 years old, a middle-class guy from Long Island, standing with the president in the White House. Just unbelievable.